From Ottawa, this is your daily news bite. A warmish sidewalk in the capital, a bruising hit on the ice, budget math in Parliament, and a trade reset reaching all the way to India. Those are the worlds colliding today. And later in the brief, the single number I'll be watching in Ottawa after this weekend's sharp cold snap. How many people need help staying warm? Ottawa's weather first, because it sets the tone for the day. Today tops out around 2 degrees Celsius with some light rain around the region, before temperatures slide hard tonight. Saturday sits near 0, then drops to about -16 overnight. Sunday and Monday look colder still, highs near -10, with no big storm signal, just that deep, dry cold that changes how the city moves. Ottawa police are also reporting charges after a traffic stop west of downtown near Booth and Rochester, following patrols tied to safety concerns around LeBreton Flats. Officers say they found a loaded gun and quantities of fentanyl, hydromorphone, and oxycodone in the vehicle. An adult and a youth were arrested and charged under federal drug and criminal laws, with the youth facing additional firearm-related charges. And on the roads, the investigation continues into the crash where an SUV drove into the building that houses the Capital City Mission Drop-In Center near Rideau and Cobourg, striking people waiting as it opened. A man in his 70s died, and others were hospitalized. Police say it's still too early to say whether speed, impairment, or weather played a role. If you were in that area around the time of the collision and have dashcam video, investigators continue to ask for the public's help. Turning to the Senators, Ottawa's first game back from the Olympic break ended in a 2-1 overtime loss to Detroit. But the moment everyone's parsing is the second-period collision that cut Captain Brady Tkachuk's nose. There was a fight right after, offsetting penalties, and frustration that Ottawa didn't come out with a power play. The league doesn't reofficiate emotions, but the team will be watching how those sequences are called going forward, especially with playoff position points at a premium. Now shifting stakes, because a few national decisions are starting to show up in local consequences. Here's the key point. Ottawa is trying to thread 3 needles at once, tightening federal spending, managing border and immigration systems, and still projecting an outward-looking trade strategy. On Parliament Hill, the House of Commons has passed Bill C-15, the Liberal Budget Implementation Bill, after the Finance Committee accepted several Conservative amendments. It passed on division, meaning there wasn't a recorded standing vote. Budget bills are confidence matters, so getting it through the House reduces near-term election pressure. Next up is the Senate, which has already been pre-studying the bill. One amendment area matters for how government moves fast. Conservatives pushed changes around a proposed power to grant temporary exemptions from federal laws. The committee-backed changes include a mandatory 30-day public consultation and a requirement for dual sign-off by a cabinet minister and the Treasury Board president. The practical effect is more friction and more transparency if the government wants short-term legal workarounds. In the federal public service, the Canada Border Services Agency says it will cut 348 positions tied to national headquarters functions and has issued 708 workforce adjustment notices. CBSA says frontline staff aren't part of this reduction, and the agency frames it as consolidation to meet a 2% budget cut, about $52 million. The union representing CBSA workers warns that behind-the-scenes roles, intelligence, science and technology, and operational support are being hit, including staff connected to Windsor. Why this matters locally. Even when a cut is described as not frontline, it can still shape how quickly files move. Travel and trade volumes, enforcement coordination, and the support systems officers rely on. The immediate question to watch is where the workload lands next, and whether service standards change quietly before anyone formally announces them. Mid-brief reference. Remember that cold snap coming to Ottawa. One knock-on issue is demand for shelters and warming spaces, and whether community services see a surge after a weekend like this. Now the external-facing piece of Ottawa's agenda. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in India on a trip aimed at resetting relations and deepening trade, especially in energy and other non-U.S. markets, part of a broader push to diversify exports. India has signaled strong interest in buying Canadian crude, LPG, and LNG, and is urging Canada to streamline approvals to speed supply. But the risk here is credibility at home. the trip is landing amid lingering allegations of Indian meddling and violence linked to Canadian soil. And some Sikh community groups say the government is prioritizing deals over safety. A senior federal official has suggested Ottawa believes hostile activity has abated, while the public safety minister says there's still more work to do. And former security officials are openly skeptical that the threat is truly over. What happens next will hinge on whether the government can show concrete security progress alongside any trade announcements, because without that, the economic pitch may not travel well domestically. In the background, there's also a wider political signal from the U.S. Midwest. Democrats are testing whether tariff pain and immigration enforcement disruptions are creating openings even in a deeply Republican state like Iowa. The specifics: soybean exports hit by reciprocal tariffs, higher farm input costs, and workforce disruptions in food processing are a reminder that trade policy doesn't stay abstract for long. Canada's own tariff exposure and trade talks will be watching those voter reactions closely. Final piece to watch. In Ottawa, it's the temperature drop tonight and what it does to demand at drop-ins and warming spaces, especially after a week already marked by a fatal downtown collision and a serious drug and gun arrest. Nationally, watch Bill C-15's path through the Senate, and for CBSA, watch whether headquarters-only cuts translate into slower decisions. And internationally, watch for whether Carney's India visit produces specific deliverables, and whether the security file is addressed in a way that reduces, rather than deepens, public mistrust. That's your daily news bite for Saturday, February 28th. Stay warm, and I'll be watching what changes when the cold really settles in.